Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Thank you for Canada House. I'm excited to lead this panel. Yesterday we announced the concept of advancing a global Indigenous technology house for next year at Southwest. We're particularly excited about that. I'd like to welcome our panel up here today. Will Loretta, Todd, please join us here, followed by Pravin, Pillay, and Ruby Singh. Welcome these cool cats to the stage.
Big couch all to myself with 3 microphones? Yeah, please. It's going to be way more comfortable.
So in the development of bringing a global Indigenous technology house as a mobile dome, as an immersive experience, and as a space to be able to uplift Indigenous perspectives, storytelling, valuing Indigenous worldview, we see a tremendous opportunity in the alignment of the intention of Southwest, as well as bringing this concept globally. So with that, I'm super excited. We're blessed to have Loretta with us. Let's hear from you and we will move forward. Thank you.
Check.
Grab this one.
Tansei. Of course, we all like to acknowledge that we are Indigenous territories here, even in Texas. First of all, I just want to start. It's informal, but I did make some notes, and I really hope you have patience with me with my notes. First of all, I wanted to give gratitude to Carol Ann Hilton for her leadership and for carrying forth the responsibilities of her grandmothers and grandfathers in a good way, and to Pravin for bringing to bear his many experiences of being in this world to do good work, and with Carol Ann and their team creating a space for story and transformation. And of course, our good friend Ruby, who works so closely with the Indigenous community, Indigenous musicians in Vancouver, many of them that I work with as well. And of course, gratitude to Dan and his team for their vision to bring Vancouver to South by so the world can see the amazing talent and opportunities on the shores of the Salish Seas in the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And thanks to Canada House and all the good people making this happen. So very quickly, just so you know who I am, I'm a founder and creative director of the I Am 4 Lab, which is an Indigenous XR lab in Vancouver. Since our inception, we've trained over 300 people in XR tech, commissioned AR and VR, and offered the first ever in the world virtual production micro-credential training program. And this year we'll be offering master classes and Unreal and introduction to animation in Unreal, plus working with Indigenous youth and elders to create an AR mural. And of course, everything we do is free and inclusive. Anybody wants to come to take our courses can show up and take our courses. I'm also a filmmaker and a producer, including creating a children's series on Indigenous science called Coyote Science. So I don't want to go too far because I know these other fellow good people have to talk, but just real quickly, why I think this Indigenous global tech house is important. I think it's important because Indigenous people, we have a different way of experiencing the immersive, expressing the immersive, creating within these spaces. And quickly, I want to give us a little bit of background to this. I'm Niawa and Métis. As Indigenous storytellers, technologists, artists, we shake off the linear thinking that limits how we think of the immersive as something that is simply an experience of the virtual within a specific set of hardware and software, or zeros and ones. Dr. Leroy Littlebear and others have challenged us to learn our languages and see the universe as beyond binaries to a place of flux and change. To reference Leroy, we exist with the rational and metaphoric mind tied to creativity, perception, images, physical sensing, intuition. Indigenous storytellers not only tell the world, we experience it as sensual beings because everything in native thought is alive with energy. Our stories have many purposes. They hold science and histories. They map lands and skies and waterways. They envelop us in the love of our ancestors and keep them close. And they make the circle where we tell and experience our stories. a circle that is critical to our cultural understanding and sense of being and belonging. I also like to very quickly reference the drum as a metaphor, and is both metaphor and rational. The drum represents respect for the animals, trees, sacred plants, fire, and the people who drum and sing, all their elements that are embodied in the drum. As we move into these digital spaces, we imagine what elements would embody the spirit of the drum. We conceptualize our futurisms before there was a word futurisms, but really it's this idea of being able to coexist beyond the physical. Leroy Little Bear once said when we had a panel way back in the day, and I'm talking way back in the day, that VR and all these cyberspace, immersive, whatever we want to, it becomes, we have always had that because we always experience the world beyond the physical. We do that through ceremony, we do that sensual, metaphoric mind that is always seeing all existence as alive. The rocks, the plants, the animals, they're all sentient beings. And that in that world, we are experiencing it, and the drum is a metaphor for part of that expression. So that's basically why I wanted to say it's so important to us not only to be here in this tech house, but to be in this space. Because it's not just that we have to play catch up with the technology. In fact, you have to play catch up with us because we are already experiencing that world beyond this world.
Hell yeah.
Thank you, Loretta, for your leadership and for bringing your beautiful energy here. And I think you framed that so beautifully of the space that we're creating and the magnitude of what you've been able to create and the impact using technology and supporting storytelling and in uplifting Indigenous worldview is formidable. So thank you for your leadership. Next, I'm going to ask Ruby to introduce yourself and tell us about your inspiration.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name's Ruby Singh. I am a first-generation Punjabi settler on stolen lands, and I don't see bounds in creativity. Like most of my work comes out into the larger world as music, but in my own private practice, honestly, it just kind of like molds in between film, photography, drawing, if I feel like it, poetry, and all sorts of things. I think the idea of like an individual style of creativity to me is a bit of a colonized mind approach to creativity, and so I try and break that apart as much as I can. Though the world really seems to want me to make music, so I do that. And so that's a little bit about me, and then kind of what inspires me was the next bit, right? A flux of different things, like so many different things inspire me in the world. Definitely, like, we're here because like new technologies are really exciting for me. I'm really into biosonification and data sonification in the last little while, but I love microscopes and microscopy. So everything from the like smallest granular things up to the largest things. Then I draw a lot of inspiration. And inspiration isn't always like a feel-good situation for me. I get a lot of inspiration from ecology and how ecologies interact with each other, but then I also feel called to make work. And so I don't know if inspiration is the right thing, but when it comes to environmental and social justice-based issues, those are things that drive me to create work as well. And I'm not sure if that fits as inspiration, but it does drive me to create work.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for being here, Pravin.
So my name is Pravin Pillay, and I'm South Asian, born in South Africa. I came to Canada as a Todd, and now live in Wananek as an invited guest, which happened about 25 years ago, to the west coast of Canada, otherwise known as Turtle Island. And in terms of Move 37 and my background, so I'm one of those people that move between capital, creativity, what have you. So I'm also the founder of Humanitas Smart Planet Systems, an impact investment fund, and the founder of Move37XR. And Move37XR has a mission to connect with immersive storytelling in a really effective way to develop empathy and connection between cultures, and more importantly, or equally importantly, between cultures and our lived world, so the greater ecology around us and that we are within. So and what inspires me? I think that's it right there, which is this place of working with complex storytelling for people to actually empathize, connect, and then work from a deeper way of being and seeing in the world. And to me, the Indigenous worldview is actually, if we are truly to perceive it, is actually an advanced technology, bioregionally immersed and grown into the world, and through culture and arts is a way that we, who may be focusing very much on other ways of economy and other ways of producing technology and using it, to bring those other parts of what we term traditionally advanced technology and merge it with the deep advanced technology that is inherent in the Indigenous worldview. So that's part of our mission, and that's what inspires me.
I've already spoken and said a lot, but I wanted to add a couple of things. Yesterday I went to a panel where there was a group of Indigenous women who've been working for many years. One lady was 89 years old, and she mentioned that how invisible we have been as Indigenous people in the popular culture. But one of the things that drives me, inspires me, many years ago I read these words by James Brady, who was a Métis leader, and he said that there were many of our people who go unknown and unremembered. And one of the things that inspires me is I don't want any Indigenous person in the world to go unknown and unremembered. There are over 7,000 Indigenous languages. There are millions of Indigenous people, and so many of us are being unknown and unremembered. And we need to use these technologies to change that. Tomorrow or tonight, maybe Lily Gladstone will win the Oscar. But what's more critical is that, and she's an amazing actress. What's more critical is that we are ever present and, in fact, leaders. And I also believe in critical mass. In the past, it's always been just a few people who get access to technology, and few people get access to opportunities. And the IM4 Lab stands for everybody having opportunities. And and the more of us who are in these spaces, the less chance it is that the kind of hierarchical systems that have been in the past who pushed us aside, they can't do that because there's just so many of us. So when you see an Indigenous person who wants to work in your space, who wants to be part of your space, realize that they're bringing their whole nation with them. They're bringing all their ancestors. They're bringing all their families and relatives. And they bring the responsibilities of that. And together you have a responsibility to respect those ancestors and to make sure no Indigenous person goes unknown or unremembered.
That's wonderful. Thank you for framing that, Loretta. I wanted to refer, Pravin and I were here for the first time last year, and as we looked at the agenda, the realization of this kind of piecemeal, there was Indigenous content across different countries, but there wasn't any singular space, and I think that's what we realized was the opportunity of creating the space for Indigenous inclusion and uplifting that worldview and how that is already being done with technology and building a critical mass of creators in this space. So in setting out to do this, I think we wanted this panel to really center on perspectives around the significance of this opportunity. Ruby, did you want to add to your perspective of the significance and opportunity of a global Indigenous technology house?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no shock to everybody in this room that we are at a critical time in humanity. And I think where we've been led and who we've been led by and the values that we've been led by are not creating a future that is actually sustainable or even welcoming to all. Whereas if we can start to really infuse Indigenous values into the ways that we organize and into these ideas of technology. And, you know, there's a whole piece of like how we make this technology. Like, just this technology is great. I really enjoy it. And it, you know, it harbors something. There is something that's harboring dark inside with you, in which how it's produced. And that's not necessarily holding the value that we all hold on this panel or we all hold in the room. And this isn't like I blame people. I'm in this. You know what I mean? I'm also sitting with this. But it's something I think in this sector we need to sit with a little bit more, is how are we actually producing these technologies? What kind of Indigenous values could be brought to that? And how we could actually move forward that way. So that, to me, especially when we're trying to kind of be at the edge in, you know, colonially known as Vancouver, and wanting to bring people into that space for that, is like really making sure that we try and ground it as much as possible with the folks that are of those territories, their values, and, you know, how that weaves into, like you were saying, ecology and all of these things. And having a global tech house that's Indigenous focused, I think, is just the way forward. And so I was very excited when you all invited me to come on this journey with you all, and very much looking forward to helping and putting a shoulder behind making that happen.
Wonderful. Pravin, did you want to add a perspective?
Absolutely. I want to add to what Ruby was sharing. One of the organizations that I was on, the team that helped establish in Canada, was Doctors Without Borders back in the early 90s. And I would say that the mission that we are on right now is something that actually one of our board members at Move 37XR, who's of the Nobel Peace Circle, James Urbanski, has joined. He asked to be on the board. And the reason is, he said, Prav, if you're going to do this, now's the time. We are out of time. James and I had this conversation 20 years ago about humanitarian crises and ecosystem collapse becoming one and the same. And a lot of the, shall we say, worldview bifurcations that we're seeing here in the US, other places, actually have resource-based scarcity involved. When we look at conflicts, whether it be Russia and Ukraine, Russia doesn't survive without Ukraine into the next century because of climate. It understands that. Everybody on that geopolitical level, this is a very complex thing. Now, we can talk about horror, we can talk about what's coming. We've known this wave has been coming for years, decades. Some of us have been working very hard behind the scenes to build the infrastructure. And what I'm seeing here right now is also a great opportunity. Because right now, we have the technology, we have a global network, and if we can do things in a decentralized, distributed way, where we can do massive, shall we say, engagement through compelling story, not telling, experiencing, we have the opportunity to deepen empathy between diverse worldviews, create a common language of what it means to be human in the contemporary world, and not be polarized into positions of fear. We have an opportunity, and this is what we're about, is how do we invite in people into this worldview, in with this technology, so that they can feel it. What does it mean to be a venture capitalist with a heart and invest in technologies that make a difference? What does it mean to be a musician or an artist or a technologist or an engineer? And when you find that humanness and you work from that place inside, we have a possibility of transforming the world in a very beautiful way that is focused on a bioregional basis, learning from the people that have the deep stories and knowledge of how to live sustainably, and in a way with the ecology where the life, as Carol Ann puts it, is at the center of the economy. And the part of it is the compelling way to invite people into that. Not to say, you're wrong, what you're doing is awful. It's like, come in here. This is a better party. Come dance with us. Come learn. Come engage with us. And that's what we're looking at the center of the Global Indigenous Technology House as being a founding principle.
Yeah.
But it's about rewiring the brain. And rewiring the brain, some people like Leroy Little Bear, who I guess you could tell is my guru, if ever I was to have a guru. And he worked with physicists, quantum physicists, because he saw a very clear connection between indigenous science, or indigenous mind, and what was being looked at in quantum physics. And one of the things he tried to encourage the physicists to do was to learn an indigenous language. Because in learning indigenous language, you're basically rewiring your brain, because you're thinking of time and space in a different way, in a new way. You're experiencing that sensual world. You're experiencing beyond gender. You're experiencing beyond the animate, inanimate. You're experiencing everything as alive, everything as energy. And I think that that's why we need to be in these spaces, because we need to be able to express who we are, be not unremembered and unknown, but also that we can bring that to bear to the world. That I think that's what's happening. All these elders were saying this many, many, many decades before, even before the environmentalists, that this, what is happening now, was going to happen. And I remember being scared when the elders told us that. I said, oh no, is this like wrath of God kind of stuff? And they said, no, no, no. This is all beyond within our own capacity. We as human beings are being sent messages because of our behavior. And if we don't change our behavior, it's going to happen. But we can change our behavior. And I do seriously believe that it can happen through that rewiring of your brain and becoming that. You can't become indigenous. You can't, be a pretendian. But you certainly can embody and embrace that different way of experiencing time and place, time and space, and also seeing everything as energy, because basically that's what science is taking us anyways. So.
I just want to keep listening to you. So beautiful, thank you. I also heard watering our consciousness, that presence of how we're connected. Just before we end here, I wanted to reflect of this moment that I had. I was at a major tech headquarters in San Francisco, and they had brought this series of innovators together, and the focus was on technology and climate change. And as I sat there, there's probably about 50 people in the room, and I listened to the narrative, the language used, how it was framed, this kind of scientific measurements, and all of that put together. And I realized that even though I was at this kind of major headquarters, and I was very honored to have been invited into the space, I realized that my state, I felt very underwhelmed. I was just like, okay, what is going on here? And I looked and I'm like, okay, I'm responsible for my state. So how do I feel inspired, and where is my inspiration in this moment? So check myself before I wreck myself, kind of thing. And I just started kind of free flow. What is the opposite of how I'm experiencing this conversation from a creative perspective? And what emerged was responsibility, accountability, the realization of our future, and that concept of life at the center. And as I realized the absence of how we experience life and how we place that within our narrative, that is so much draws from indigeneity. And what emerged from that, of me aligned in my own inspiration, was the development of an Indigenomics Now Global Forum, which will be a technology platform, 24 hours, virtual, on-demand, Indigenous content, asking the question, what might economy look like with life at the center? And I think to look at natural law as upholding that within this concept of advancing and upholding Indigenous worldview, to create and establish a structure that reflects the natural world. So 13 moons, 13 streams of content, 4 directions, and the ability to bring agency to the conversation. So taking that away from government, from institutions, from all of these global structures that is keeping us in some ways in the same narrative. And that's really what I'm also inspired within this concept of a global Indigenous technology house, is to burst forth into the light and be able to realize how we tell stories, from expanding that worldview and using technology. And I love that what Pravin was saying about that experience, that it aligns our ability to feel alive. And for our ability to facilitate that through the Global Indigenous Technology House. That's what we came here today to share that vision with you of what we'll be coming back to Southwest with next year. So thank you to our panelists. Big appreciation for you coming out. Thank you to Canada House as well for the invitation, Vancouver, and particularly Frontier Collective for the invitation to come spend time with you. Big respect for your leadership and all that you do. Thank you.